Three, two, one, here we go. RAINMAN'S Take podcast. Observations on the world we live in. My take on current events and other topics of interest. Also, interviews with some really cool people. So let's get the conversation going. Welcome back, my guest, Ed Bartlett. I've had Ed on in the past. We were maybe about a year or two ago. We were talking about sort of the current readiness of the United States Navy and in particular the United States submarine fleet. And so I wanted to have Ed back on because he just wrote a great book that we're going to talk about a little bit as we work our way into the conversation of updating us on what's going on in the Navy and also in the submarine fleet. So just to refresh everybody's memory, Ed Bartlett is chairman and CEO of Bartlett Maritime Corporation. He served on active duty on board multiple nuclear-powered attack submarines during the Cold War, including Thresher-class attack submarine USS Gatto. Captain Bartlett, after leaving active service, was licensed as both a master and an engineering officer in the U.S. Merchant Marine. So, Ed, welcome back. How are you doing today?
Great to see you. Good to be back.
Well, Good. And thanks for joining me. The book is called The 69-Day Run, a sea story about winning the Cold War. And the book is about a deployment of the USS Gatto. So since you were on that ship, why don't you tell me a little bit about how the book got started and how it's going with sales of the book?
Well, the book is it's a story about the last deployment I did while I was on active duty. It was actually my third attack submarine, and not my first deployment. It was my last, and it was unique in a number of ways. Gatto was a very old ship at the time. I was on a brand new ship. I was on a midlife ship, and I was on Gatto, which was at near the end of its life. It was right before its final overhaul. The ship was in very tough shape, and we went out and we did the job. As I talk about in the book at one point, we go on demand. And I said it in the prologue against the space shuttle, which we happened to be in Port Canaveral for a Liberty stop after doing our annual weapons shoot down at AUTEC range, and we were there coincidentally with a scheduled launch of the space shuttle, which of course never launched during the 3 days we were there. And we decided, okay, fine, they're not going to launch. We're going to get back to home port. So we just said, let's go, and we went on demand. That's what submariners do. And we did the mission on demand. We stayed on deployment, and we dealt with a number of material issues and challenges in a very difficult ship. The Thresher class ships are known as the 594s. Even though Thresher was 593, it was renamed after the Thresher was lost. They were tough ships. They were very capable, but designed right to the limits of physics. So I decided it was time to document what we did and document what really happened during the Cold War, because so few people know what really occurred. It was war, a complete combat in a very different, new kind of way, but it was every bit of combat and every bit of risk involved by the people that went out there and won the war.
Oh, and like I said, the book is great. It's called The 69-Day Run. And for anybody who's a history buff, a military history buff, this is a great read if you want to know really what it's like to live in a massive steel can, 1,000 feet below the surface of the ocean. So, and I said this before, Ed, when we were talking before we went on recording, you can't help but feel claustrophobic when you're reading this thing. So go ahead and tell me a little bit. So the Thresher class, was that the first class of nuclear powered submarines?
It was actually the second generation. The early ships, the Nautilus and the Skate class and the first Seawolf, they were largely experimental ships, And then the skipjack class debuted the now classic teardrop shaped hull with one propeller. And when Thresher came out, it was the ship that had all the capabilities that the Cold War demanded. And so it was designed right to the limit of physics. It was the first, second generation ship, and they served right on the front lines right up until their retirement in the mid 1990s. They were tough little ships, but they got the job done.
When you say little ship, how big was the crew?
The crew was about 110 people, and at the time, for all the Thresher class ships, back at the time, it was all men. Of course, now today we welcome women into the submarine force, but it was about 110 guys, and about 10 or 11 officers, and the rest were enlisted guys, and did it to it.
And what I find fascinating, and we'll get into sort of the main meat and potatoes here in a second, what I find fascinating about the submarine community, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of what the little I know about like the SEAL teams, and that is officer and an enlisted personnel. Obviously, there's a hierarchy. There has to be, but for the most part, I mean, especially in the submarine force, most of you guys are extremely smart, having gone through all sorts of nuclear physics schools, and so it's a very, very high level of intellect across the board.
Every single person on a submarine could sink the submarine by doing something wrong, or could save the submarine in a disaster. And we count on every single person on the submarine to know what's going on, to do the right thing, and to be able to respond in an instant. So there's not a lot of distinction. Everybody has their job and everybody has their role, but everybody is expected to perform at the highest level.
Yeah, amazing. And I think probably the underlying theme of today's conversation is going to be Donald Rumsfeld had that famous quote in the beginning of the Gulf War where he basically said, the beginning of the invasion in 2003 into Iraq, he basically said, you go to war with the equipment that you have, whether or not it's brand new or it's on its last legs and you got to put it together with duct tape, you're going to war when you have to go. And so that kind of, this book sort of solidifies that in my view. And what I find amazing is you're doing that, you're piecemealing ships together, and the intensity of that environment, physical environment on that ship itself. That was one thing that fascinated me about this book.
Well, that's one of the reasons I wrote it and wanted to publish it. Another reason is we've got a business and we've got a number of people in the Midwest working to support submarine maintenance. And my experience has been the closer you are to the coast, the more you appreciate these sorts of things, the closer you are to a submarine port. But when you're working on equipment from Ohio or Wisconsin or wherever it might be in the Midwest, you don't really have that appreciation. So this is going to be for each of our employees when they become hired, their first day of employment, this is a gift to them to understand the significance of what everybody in the industry means to the ultimate success of the mission. So everybody from the welder to the mechanic to the electrician that are building and maintaining equipment in the ship itself, to the operators that operate the ship, are all part of a team which goes and gets the mission done.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit further on down, because the last time we talked, you had been, you kind of had a plan to alleviate the stress and the problems that the very few sort of depot level maintenance areas for submarines, you were trying to get one kind of into on one of the Great Lakes, if I remember correctly, but we'll talk about that in a second. One of the things that I found very interesting in the book, and it definitely relates to today, was you talk about in the book just during the 60s, at the height of the Cold War, how fast the United States was pumping out submarines. So give me a sense of what the size of the submarine fleet, and then how long it took for one of those things to get built and deploy.
Well, from the period when the USS George Washington, our first missile submarine, was launched until the end of the construction of the so-called 41 for Freedom, the first missile submarines, the 657, and the name escapes my mind right now. I should know it. Anyways, during that little over 8 year period, we delivered a new submarine into the fleet on average every 44 days. So just about every month, a brand new submarine entered the fleet. Yesterday, as we record this podcast yesterday, the Navy accepted delivery of the U.S. future USS New Jersey. The most previous to that, the most recent submarine delivered was USS Hyman Rickover 795. The second Rickover was last October. But before that, it was over a year. It was almost 18 months to the previous delivery. We are currently delivering submarines at the rate of about 1.2 submarines a year, even though the demand signal is 2 submarines a year plus a Columbia-class submarine. So really it's 3. And then to satisfy the AUKUS requirement, we've really got to be delivering about 2.3 to 2.4 submarines a year today, compared against we were delivering 10 or 11 submarines a year during the 60s. So completely different situation with our industrial base.
And is that, and I completely disagree with this, the way the military has been going in the last several years, and that's divest to invest, get smaller to get better type, get more modern. I'm completely opposed to that, especially in light of the fact that right now the Chinese apparently are cranking out submarines very similar to the rate that we were back in the 60s. Is that right? Do I have that roughly correct?
Well, right now the Chinese Navy is the largest Navy in the world, and they are building submarines very quickly.
Wow.
We lost primacy of in terms of the size of our Navy about 2015. Right now, one single shipyard in China has more industrial capability than all the major shipyards in the United States combined. It's a daunting comparison. We've got a lead in terms of capability. They've got the larger fleet. We've got a lead in capability, but that is rapidly eroding. And that's of great concern to us and to many in the national defense community.
And is that something? And I had Jerry Hendricks on a couple weeks ago, and his podcast is out there right now. And I know you and Jerry are friends. He was basically saying the same thing, and that is, what is it going to take for us to get back to at least parity with the Chinese, if not take over back to being the supreme Navy on the seas? Is that even possible? Are we too far beyond the power curve there?
Well, just the other day, the president signed the National Security Supplemental. And while all the talk about that bill was related to the Ukraine and the Israel funding, there's a significant portion of that bill that's actually dedicated towards rebuilding the submarine industrial base. On the order of $3 billion out of that 95 is directed towards the submarine industrial base. That's going to be a good down payment in continuing what's been going on for the last several years, investing in the industrial base to grow. We need new capabilities at the existing facilities that we've got in the industrial base, and we need new facilities overall. You know, during the 1990s, after the end of all war in 1991, so-called, for the third time in the 20th century, our nation took a peace dividend. You know, after the First World War, after the Second World War, and then after the Cold War, we took a huge peace dividend, completely destroyed our military industrial base, and then we had to find ourselves rapidly rebuilding it at some point. Well, that some point after the Cold War is now. We're late to the game. You know, the 45-day shipbuilding study that the Secretary of the Navy commissioned came back with some very disappointing results. The Constellation, the new frigate, is 3 years late. The new missile submarine, the Columbia class, is 18 to 20 months late, something like that. The Virginia class is a couple of years late. And we've got this AUKUS commitment that we got to meet. The Australians they need that capability between ourselves and the UK. Very important. So we are behind the curve, but I can tell you there are a lot of companies out there that are putting a lot of effort into trying to catch up. And I think the Navy's got the right approach and going in the right direction. It's just we're late to the game, and everybody's got to run hard.
Yeah, and that's a shame. And if you're at peace for too long, you get soft, you get lazy, and then next thing you know, somebody's biting at your heels, and it's time to turn it back up, which is a shame. Are you, as with your contacts that are still on active duty in the Navy, in the submarine community, are they experiencing sort of the same, and I don't want to say necessarily a degradation in the talent of the people coming in to serve in that community, but you hear all sorts of craziness, you know, the whole woke vibe coming out of the military, and it seems like they're more concerned about that sort of thing than they are about their warfighting capabilities. Is that also being felt in the submarine community? Or are you guys pretty well insulated because of the fact that you need to be such a unique character to belong to the submarines?
I think that the so-called woke and whatever concerns in that area are more isolated in the submarine community. The thing that's really damaging the submarine community, and Admiral Skip Bowman is one of our advisors and a good personal friend, was the head of naval reactors. But before that, he was chief of naval personnel, and he's impressed this upon me in our many conversations that what we're doing to the people that are on active duty in the submarine force is almost unconscionable. With the long overdue delays in submarine overhauls, we're destroying the morale of the crews. We're making it not possible for crew people that are coming to the ships new to be able to get qualified and get the experience required. And the next thing you know, they're going to be going out on deployment and expecting to perform when they've been spending most of their career sitting in a dry dock somewhere trying to get their ship off the blocks and out to sea where it belongs. So the impact of the maintenance delays is far beyond just not having the ship available. It's also destroying the morale of our crews. I know a very fine young naval officer who just left the Navy because they were unwilling to go back to another submarine in overhaul. They'd suffered through a shipyard period. It was extended. They couldn't get the ship out. And despite the fact that they were near the top of their class and capability and very well rated in the community, they've elected to resign their commission, go into the reserves, and go into industry. It's just destroying the morale. It's destroying the capability, the warfighting capability. It's not the woke thing that's killing it. It's the fact that the ships are stuck in the dry docks. That is terrible.
Yeah, and what is so that $3 billion in your mind? Where would that be best utilized? Is it building more facilities? Is it increasing the or the ability, the work schedule on the existing facility? What needs to happen?
There's a multiple pronged effort going on, and there's a group, the Submarine Industrial Base Group, that's being run out of the Team Submarine at the Navy, and they're focused on one prong is workforce. We need to develop about 150,000 additional skilled tradespeople over the next decade to build the ships the Navy needs. That is a non-trivial challenge. All the years that we told all these kids going to school that the only acceptable outcome from going to high school, the only acceptable next thing is college. It was wrong. There's great careers in the skilled trades, and it's a great career for people that are inclined to do mechanical work, and they should be encouraged to do that, and we are taking part in that. So part of it's workforce development. There's got to be a lot of investment there. Part of it is capabilities in the facilities that exist. The Navy's currently investing about $20 billion to overhaul and upgrade the 4 naval shipyards. Of course, that's going to take about 2 decades. Nothing is easy. Nothing is quick in today's environment. And then the third thing is we do need new facilities. We need additional capability. Our general counsel was Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy during the 90s, and he actually implemented the BRAC program for the Navy during that period, closed a number of the naval shipyards and naval stations, and he's back with us even though he's long retired because he wants to be part of restoring the capability that was unfortunately foregone during the post-Cold War drawdown.
And it seems like that seems to be happening a lot in today's world. And I'm not going to go bashing on Biden here, but the idea of you shut something down and then it becomes a crisis and then you come in as the savior to fix it. That's crazy. So anyway, before we get back to kind of what's going on in today's world, I want to just bounce back real quick, if we could, to the 69-day run, the book. There was a passage in the book that freaked me out. And that was, you basically said, submarines are always leaking. It's just a matter of how big or how controlled it is. That to me is crazy. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, that's a interesting thing. And I just tell you, I wrote this book over the period of a decade, and when I finished it, I had a few people read it and whatever, and I knew it was ready, and I had to submit it to the Pentagon, to the Department of Defense security people, to get it cleared before I could publish it, and it actually sat there for an entire year, waiting to get reviewed. And some books get reviewed like lickety split, but I guess they finally decided to publish it. But one of the things I talk about, submarines are always leaking. The shaft seals where there's a big hole in the back of the ship where the propulsion shaft goes out from the engines to the propeller, right? Well, you got to seal that shaft,
Yeah.
and all seals leak. And mostly the leakage that occurs is at seals. You don't have leaks through the hull doesn't crack or any of that sort of thing. But gaskets leak, seals leak, things leak, and sometimes leaks occur in unexpected places or at unexpected rates, and you end up just having to direct it to the bilge and manage it the best you can till you can get back into port. So yeah, it's always leaking, and you've always got to manage it, and that's one of the things that drives maintenance. And for people that don't have the experience like you, it always is kind of a strange wake up. What do you mean it's leaking? Well, of course it's leaking.
You're at 3,000 feet underneath the surface, and the pressure is an insane number, and that leak you crush you like a tin can. So that I found that fascinating. What talk to me a little bit about the nuclear reactor in a submarine, and obviously obviously that's a very very classified issue, but how big is it on a nuclear submarine? How big is that reactor? Is it like the size of a car, or is it the size of a suitcase? What does it look like?
Well, think about it. I mean, the horsepower rating of the ship is classified, how fast it can go is classified, and all that. But
Right.
It's thousands of horsepower. I can say that. And just think about. I mean, if you've walked through a museum ship, for instance, if you go down to Patriots Point in Charleston, you can walk through the aircraft carrier down the Yorktown, and you can walk through the engine room, and you can see the size of those engines. Well, those engines are, I think, on that ship maybe 25, 30,000 horsepower, something like that. And you get a visual for the size of the engines, and then you can go in the fire room and see the size of the boilers on that ship. Well, if a submarine had a similar horsepower, I'm not saying it does, but you can get an idea
Right.
that these are significantly sized things. I'll just tell you this. This is kind of a funny little statistic. I was on part of a crew of a brand new Los Angeles class ship, which they're now old now, but that just tells you how old I am. I used to have more hair. But back when I was on a brand new 688, we calculated the volume of the engine room, including the reactor compartment, versus the volume of the rest of the ship. 62% of the ship was reactor and engine room in terms of volume.
Wow.
Now, not all the stuff back in the back is propulsion related. You got the electrical generators, and you got the water maker, and you've got all the other sorts of things. But it's a significant portion of the ship.
Yeah, that's incredible. And then obviously you go into, kind of sticking with the book here, you just go into a little bit about what life is like for the crew on that ship. And really essentially there's no private space for the most part. I mean, everybody's doubling up on racks, and if you're not eating, it's that I found fascinating. And for the lay person who's never been in the military, that would be something that would almost be like a nightmare. But you guys, obviously, you deal with it.
In the old days, and they've changed, I think they've changed the operating routine now, but when I was out there, you lived an 18-hour day. You stood watch for 6 hours, you got off watch, and you usually had training or maintenance or something after watch. And then you get maybe 6 hours sleep, and then you're back on watch again. So it's like an 18-hour rotation. The other thing that's interesting, and I talked about a little bit in the book, when something significant breaks underway and you've got to do maintenance underway, you don't go to sea with extra people to do maintenance. So we talked about at one point, we had a steam leak in something that we couldn't tolerate anymore. Yeah, steam pipes sometimes leak too, out of gaskets. Once again, it was a gasket. And we had to shut down part of the steam plant and isolate that area and replace that gasket and do a little machining, repair, and whatever. So for the 30 hours that it took to do that maintenance with the ship in a limited capability mode, you want the ship to be fully capable at all times. So you're shutting down part of the engine room to do this maintenance. Well, the people doing the maintenance are the people that are operating the ship. So for the 30-hour period in that particular case, you were either the people that were in that part of the crew were either standing watch or working on the maintenance. Nobody got any sleep. And so afterwards, you went back to your regular 18-hour routine. But a number of people took, we called them equalizers, where you get off watch, you hit the bunk, and you don't get up again until it's time for the next watch. And you get, maybe 10 hours in the rack and try to refresh your body and get back to semi-normal again.
Crazy. And is I think the original for this particular mission you guys on, it was originally supposed to be 72 days. So that's essentially just under a 3-month deployment. Is that typical for submarines? They're gone for kind of a shorter period of time.
Well, the whole thing is dependent upon how much food you can carry. That's the only limiting thing in a submarine's deployment. So, for instance, in the deployments that I did, where I went to the Mediterranean, you leave with a full set of food and stores and whatever else, and you stop partway through the trip. You get a 1 week off, and you do whatever maintenance you need shut down. We used to have a submarine tender in La Maddalena, Italy, a little island off Sardinia, and we'd do our maintenance there and then restock our food and then go back out and whatever and do a 6-month, 7-month, 8-month trip, whatever it might be. For the guys in the Pacific, we had submarine tenders we had a base in Guam, submarine tenders there, and bases. At one point, we had tenders in Diego Garcia. So if it's a longer trip, you have to have some place to stop and restock your food supply. On these certain special missions like we were on, you can carry 90 days worth of food, which means you're typically not going to be gone for more than 100 days. Figure that one out for yourself. You make sure you got enough food, make sure you got enough toilet paper, that sort of thing, consumables. And then when you run out of food, you got to be, heading towards someplace where you can get some. So that was why that mission, it was intended to be a port-to-port mission. Leave New London, return to New London, go do what you got to do, and come back. And, you're full going out, and you're empty coming back for food.
Yep. So really, again, as somebody who's very unfamiliar with the submarine world, I used the Hunt for Red October as sort of my reference point. And that mission that the Gato was on during the time of its book was basically trailing a Russian submarine. Is that those scenes obviously are artificial in the movie, but are those scenes pretty accurate on how that whole sort of dance, how you get behind each other? Was that pretty accurate, or was it just Hollywood?
Well, no, the area of most vulnerability is directly behind another submarine. That's where the target ship is most vulnerable because you don't have any listening capability to the stern. And so, and I talk about it in the book, and, it's pretty clear. This is one of the ways that we won the Cold War. The Soviets had to give up because we've got a credible nuclear capability with our ballistic missile submarines. Currently, it's our Ohio class. Back when I was out there, it was the 41 for Freedom boats. But our Ohio class ships don't get trailed. They don't trail us. Okay, they can't find them. They're quiet. Where they patrol, no one's there. And so everybody knows we have a credible capability to respond and launch nuclear missiles in it and respond to an attack. What we did by trailing the other guy and by him knowing that he was being trailed, he no longer had a credible capability to launch his weapons because it takes a few minutes to go from deciding to launch to actually launch. So in the period of time where you start making those preparations to launch a missile in a hostile situation, all it takes is one snapshot war shot to put him on the bottom and keep you from having that missile get launched. So we prevented them from having a capability. Their missile submarines were worthless to them, which is one of the reasons why they had to give up. They could not keep it up. We beat them into the ground. We won, they lost. As simple as that. And our submarine force was key to doing that. And very few people know that. Hopefully now more when they
Well,
read the
and
book.
actually
Will.
that, yeah, no, and thank you for clarifying that, because that is definitely, um, you make that a point of detail in describing doing all that. And so it's interesting to hear why that was, because exactly the guy's in full defensive mode as opposed to stopping, going through the procedure to which I'm sure you guys would recognize the sounds coming out of that thing, getting ready to go.
Absolutely.
Okay. So bring it back to today then. Uh, I assume we're all still doing that, us and the Russians, us probably and the Chinese now, trying to find out where they are. Have they gotten better? Are their submarines as capable as ours? Are we having trouble keeping track of them? Where do we stand right now?
I haven't been out to sea since 1985 on a submarine, but I'm confident that we have similar capability relative to the other guy. The problem that we're facing is, as we talked about a little while ago, they're getting better quickly, and we're not building enough to keep up. And that's really the concern. The Davidson window, and I'm sure you talked to Jerry about it and others, the Davidson window
Yep.
is starting to close. And it's our submarines that the Chinese are most concerned about. It's our submarines they cannot counter because they can't find us. That's the key.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. And for everybody out there who may not be familiar with it, the Davidson window is essentially a period of time that the experts in the DoD have, through their research and analytics. There's a period of time where the Chinese would need to do something if they're going to do something in a kinetic war. There's a certain period of time, and that's called the Davidson window. And that, when I was talking to Jerry, and this makes perfect sense, he seems to think that something's going to happen before Biden leaves office because they understand Biden. They know what he's going to do, whereas they're not sure what Trump would do if they were to do something, if Trump were to become president. So that Davidson window, it seems like we're in like a 6-month block right now where things could get very interesting. And speaking of that, another thing that you had mentioned in the book, and this was crazy to me, but I guess it shouldn't be, because 2/3 of the world is ocean, and a lot of that hasn't even been charted yet. But you talk about the USS Connecticut running ground southeast of Guam. It hit an uncharted underground mountain. Is that right?
Yes, sir. That's right. And the ship was significantly damaged, and it was 648 days before that ship went into dry dock to start getting fixed. And to make it even worse, we only have 2 Seawolf class submarines, which are the most capable ships in our inventory. We only have 2, and that's one of them. And so we've cut our most capable submarines in half by that one accident. They don't happen very often. The most recent one before that was in 2005 when the USS San Francisco grounded out in the Pacific as well. And unfortunately, in that case, we lost someone. A young sailor from Akron, Ohio, actually perished in that event. No one was lost in the Connecticut, but it took that ship out of service. It's going to be out of service for another 2 to 3 years.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's amazing.
You don't have a windshield underwater. You do not have a windshield. Okay, you're letting it rip. You're flying blind. You're letting it rip, and you're flying blind. You're trusting your instruments. You're trusting the charts. You're trusting everything. So in a way, it's a testament to the skill and capability of our crews that this doesn't happen more often.
Yeah. And I'm just going to go off on a tangent here, because I would imagine somebody's doing this, but there's got to be companies or even the military that are trying as hard as they can to chart everywhere. Because that just blows my mind that just randomly a ocean mountain, the thing pops up and so that I'm assuming that's the case. Is that the case?
The oceanographer of the Navy actually has an active program to continue charting the world's oceans.
Yeah. I mean, it's in helicopters when I was flying, they train you very heavily on instrument flying in case you fly into the clouds or they, air traffic control put you in the clouds. You got to be able to fly. And so I completely appreciate that. It's just, it really is an incredible thing to read about what it takes to maneuver around in the ocean in complete darkness.
It's a hell of a life. It's a hell of a life. When you do it, it gets in your blood, and you don't want to stop doing it. And you stop and think about it. It's a pretty audacious way to live, but it's important for national security, and everybody that I know that's a fellow submarine veteran is incredibly proud about what we did and what the folks are, our sons and daughters that are out there today continue to do in defense of the nation.
That's amazing. So let's get now back to the present. Let's just talk about the Davidson window now. So where do you think we are in terms of our Navy's capability, in terms of counteracting any type of movement that China might make? Are we, like we talked about a little bit in the beginning, obviously we're behind the power curve in terms of our maintenance and depot level and major level overhauls of ships, but the Navy that we currently have out and operational, is that going to be enough to stop something potentially happening in the South China Sea or Taiwan?
Well, smarter people than I have weighed in on this. And if you read the January issue of Proceedings magazine from the Naval Institute, there's a number of different articles in there that'll tell you that we've got a very, very lethal capability right now, but we're right on the edge. It's not enough. We need, it's not definitive. We need to have more capability. As somebody said when we delivered the New Jersey yesterday, we need more players on the field. And so we need to both accelerate the delivery of new ships, and we need to get these ships that are stuck in forever overhaul back in the fleet where they belong. It's just as simple as that. And as you well know from your experience in aviation, their numbers matter. Numbers matter. And the number of vessels really, really matters.
Yeah. I mean, and for the first time in my life living here in San Diego, just basically as a result of everything that's going on in the world with, you read about China's increasing their capabilities, Russia's increasing their capabilities. For the first time in my life living out here, I realized that, San Diego Harbor would be target number one on the West Coast, most likely. And so, the amount of ships that if we were to get wind that something was about to happen, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of ships that wouldn't be able to even make it out of the harbor because of the delay in their maintenance. Is that roughly accurate or no?
Well, departing from submarines for a minute, and I'm not an expert in this area, but I've observed, in San Diego right now, the USS Boxer has had a tough go getting back underway. And that is a capital ship. That is a very important ship to our overall capability, because the Boxer was not able to deploy, and then it had a false start to its deployment, had to come back for rudder issues, as I understand it. We currently don't have a marine amphibious unit deployed around the world. So it's not just submarines. It's the entire Navy's fleet needs to, we need to crank it up on the maintenance, and we need to get more capability on the field.
Yeah. Sounds like the cops are coming after you.
My office is in downtown Cleveland, and sometimes the sirens get us.
I love it. I love it. So what is if something were to happen, whether it's in the Middle East, whether it's in Europe, if something were to start happening, and the U.S. military had to ramp up for actual combat, do we have it just feels like from the outside, talking with a lot of people, it just feels like we would be a little bit slow to the draw to get going. And then you throw in incidences like where the Key Bridge went down in Baltimore, and you got those two Navy supply ships that are just sitting there that probably wouldn't be able to get out. So what is are you optimistic about our capabilities? Where do you stand, and what do you think would happen?
I think that we're rapidly approaching the valley, the bottom, in terms of, the world goes in terms of sine waves. Things go up and go down, right? I think we're approaching the bottom, because I think that, speaking of those ships that are stranded in Baltimore, the ship, the Gaza Pier that they're trying to build, one of the ships, the Bobo, had an engine fire and it come back. Right, our sea lift ships, and this is one of Jerry Hendrick's big things about the his so-called Ships Act. The sea lift ships are old and need to be replaced. Our submarines are behind on their maintenance, and we're not building new ones fast enough. Our amphib ships are in challenged shape. Overall, I think there's a broad recognition, particularly in the Congress and in the administration, that we're approaching the bottom and we have to invest. We have to expand our industrial base. And we have to get back where we need to be. This is the nation that during World War II delivered 6,700 new vessels in a period of less than 4 years. I don't know that we could do that today because the total industrial strength of the nation has been offshored quite a bit. But we're the United States of America. We're not going to roll over and give up. We're going to come back. So I think we're at the point where we're starting to come back.
Good. Well, that's good. And Jerry kind of had the same sort of optimistic outlook, and that was, if you poke the bear enough, the bear's going to come back. And in the past, we've always been able to come back and do what we needed to do. It's just one of the things that sort of, I don't want to get into politics, but I'm going to right now, and that is, would this change if Trump became president in November?
I'm going to have to defer on that because I have a business.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Well, we run it right down the middle.
I hear you.
We'll deal with whoever's in office.
Gotcha.
But I'll tell you, from a national security point of view, you got to support investment in our national defense, because maybe it's political, but I'll say peace through strength, which was Reagan's thing. I mean, that really comes down from Sun Tzu all the way back in ancient times. If you want to avoid war, if you want peace, you need to be prepared for war. That's how you deter war. And that's one of the chapters in my book, goes into some detail about that. Preparation for war is the greatest insurance to get peace. And that's really what we need to do.
Yeah.
Si vis pacem, para bellum.
Yeah. And I completely agree. And as well, the technology, which we've always been up until current day, has always been an advantage for us. We need to get that back, and it just I'm concerned that it's going as slowly as it is. But it's good to hear that they, within that defense bill that they did pass and give you guys some money to start figuring this thing out. So we're kind of coming up towards the end of the time here. What would be sort of your for somebody like me who reads a lot but knows that he's not getting nearly the information, and probably not even getting the right information? What would you tell people that, hey, listen, yes, it looks bleak, but finish that sentence?
Well, the count hasn't started yet. In boxing, you go to the mat. Yet the count hasn't started. We may be a little bit down, but I look to the Red Sea. Okay, if you want a thing to be optimistic about, look to the Red Sea. Now that's been expensive and it's been difficult and whatever, but our destroyers have done the job over there, and we've maintained that sea line of communication. Don't count us out. The United States is not going to get counted out. Things are challenged. Yeah. We need to go harder. We need to invest more in this. And the industrial base needs to expand. But don't count America out. And
I completely agree. I guess, and again, I'll go political because I know you can't. But something needs to change, I think, at the top for this to sort of get a little bit more of a sense of urgency that I think it needs. So, well, listen, Ed, this was great, man. The book was great. Thank you very much. And let me just bring it up. I'm going to put it on the screen here real quick for people who are interested. It's called The 69-Day Run. And it is a great book. If you're a history buff, military history, Navy buff, highly recommend it. Ed, I appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much for your time.
It's been my pleasure. Have yourself a great day.
Thank you. And I'll finish off like I always do. If you're in the military, fire departments, police departments, or first responders, if that's you out there, thank you very much for your service. Stay safe. This is the Rain Man, Ed Bartlett. Thanks again, sir. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching Rain Man's Take, Observations on the World We Live In. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow Rain Man's Take on Instagram at Rain Man's Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.